God damn, this game is so good. I could just end the video there, but I won't do that to you. You clicked on the video, and thank you for doing that. I don't think it's exactly a controversial statement to say that the genre of boomer shooter, why are those quotation marks there? Boomer shooter is a genre now, thanks Valve. No longer is it just a derogatory term to make fun of old gamers, so rejoice. Not too hard though, don't want to give yourself a heart attack. Anyway, where was I? Alright, boomer shooters, or if you want to be technically correct, arena shooters, haven't exactly been booming in quite some time. Games like Quake and Doom had their time in the spotlight in the late 90s and early 2000s before slowly dying away due to the cultural boom that series like Call of Duty and Battlefield had in the late 2000s. Gone are the maze-like level designs, bunny hopping, and health packs, and in its place extremely curated, scripted levels with regenerating health. You can even feel this shift in the arena shooters around this time themselves as they would shift away from the genre, with Doom 3 and its foray into survival horror, or wallow in its waning relevance like with Quake 4. There's also a growing barrier to entry for these games, as the built-in fanbase from the older games, with their higher skill, made multiplayer daunting for new players. Many attempts were made to rejuvenate the genre's life, but all was for naught, as it would die out. May it rest in peace. Thank you for your service. Isn't this the end of the video? Sorry, I shouldn't make that joke twice in the same video. Anyways, don't tell RC Batala, I definitely pronounced that name correctly, the creator of this game, because he still thinks that it's a competitive genre. You know what they say, competition breeds excellence, and they're acting like it's fierce. Needless to say, Ultrakill is definitely not perfect, but damn is it fun. I even wrote fun in all caps, so that's how you know I mean it. Let's take this one step at a time. This game was released into early access on Steam in 2020, and 4 years later, still isn't completely finished. Now a statement like that would normally, for me, be a massive red flag, especially considering this game asks for more than your typical indie game at $25. It does mention on the Steam page that the price will increase as more content is added, so at the time you're watching this video, it might not be that price anymore. Jumping the gun now, I will say that I think it's worth the asking price now, but just know that if you do decide to play it now, it's not completely done. And judging by the massive amount of overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, it seems the majority agree. Thankfully, updates are pushed out fairly regularly with patches and new content. It seems that Batala and his team, still wrong, are dedicated to seeing this game through to completion. It just seems like that day might be pretty far away considering the timeline up until now. And I don't mean to sound like an asshole saying that. I know game development can take a long time, especially as a small team. So enough about that, and let's move on to the actual game now. Let's start it up now. And obviously, someone didn't upscale the opening publisher splash screen and the Resident Evil-esque content warning. The story, how do I explain it? Let's start with the basics first, because it doesn't take long for the story to start diving into stuff like the true meaning of life and shit. There is indeed a rabbit hole to go down, and we'll get there soon enough. You play as the robot V1 that is battling through the layers of hell to kill a lot of different things to suck out their blood. These husks that are the regular denizens of hell to higher class demons that can put up more of a challenge. There's even some robotic and angelic slaughtering as well. It doesn't really seem like there's much of a reason for us doing this other than to just survive, as V1 is a prototype machine that is fueled by being showered in blood. Pretty much how you get your health back, which seems kind of odd, as there are other ways to do that, I don't know. As you make your way through the layers, you'll run into a few bosses that have varying degrees of plot significance. Another prototype robot, V2, a more advanced robot that really brings the boom, if you know what I mean. The fallen giant King Minos, who used to be the Judge of Hell, and is looking to give a beatdown with his massive hands, as well as Gabriel, an angel that was appointed to the new Judge of Hell by his council, and some other beings that tried to stop your descent. To understand exactly what's going on, you essentially have to rely on the enemy compendium to tell you, as most of this stuff is very rarely told to you directly in cutscenes. I'll give it some praise for how unintrusive it is in case you're here just for the thrill of the kill, but it does ask more out of the player to get even a general understanding of what's going on. So what is exactly going on here? Well, I'll try to explain it to the best of my understanding. Let's take this one layer at a time, because each layer does have its own story to tell. But first, a more general overview. In a future where mankind is dead, hell is full, and also where blood is fuel for machines, God is missing, and this causes chaos within heaven. Due to this, it gives an opportunity to the occupants of hell to try and take over. This leads to the development of machines that can run off blood, are in charge of fighting in the war. As far as I'm aware, it's never truly stated who created them, whether it be heaven or hell. You'd think, considering how we are fighting through the depths of hell, that it was the angels who created them, but considering how you duel against Gabriel multiple times, it's heavily implied that that isn't the case. Needless to say, it's confusing. Perhaps it was the now extinct humans that created them before their time was up. Considering how the humans think about humanity, the meaning of life and death, and the importance of what it means to accomplish something, maybe they have a little bit of human thought left in them. That's just speculation on my part, however, so take it with a grain of salt. Anyways, this leads to a final war that wasn't going well for the angels, I guess, so they created a council that would restore peace in heaven, as well as take God's place until his return. They were successful and able to swiftly take down the armies of hell with their newfound peace. That peace being aptly titled The New Peace. Due to the machines' creations being around the end of the final war, some machines were able to be mass-produced while some were not, specifically V1 and V2, due to the fact that blood was understandably pretty hard to come by in an era called The New Peace. As you make your way down each layer, you run into and subsequently kill important figures in the layers. In Limbo, the first layer after the prelude area outside of Hell, you have your first encounter with V2, who wants to fight for some reason. It's quite the showboaty little asshole too. In the Lust layer, you fight the corpse of the King Minos. This guy is actually pretty interesting due to the position he held while he was still alive, being a ruler of the Lust layer and the Judge of Hell that dealt out punishment to sinners as he saw fit. But he also led a renaissance of sorts among the Husk in the Lust layer, which the council did not appreciate and Gabriel swiftly took care of, giving him the new title of Judge of Hell. It doesn't take long to realize that the angels are kind of dicks. A little cliche, but it's indeed entertaining, so I won't give it too much shit. Then there's the Gluttony layer, where you have the first battle with Gabriel in the heart cavity of King Minos. This place sucks mostly because of all the stomach acid everywhere, meaning a high chance of landing balls deep in health-sapping liquid. You win, and he screws off the parts unknown, not before name-calling you like the bitch he is.
Insignificant fuck! This is not over!
He gets the light of God taken out of him quite literally, and he has a day to get it back, and the only way to do that is by killing V1. So now you have Gabriel on your ass, and it's pretty much a race to the bottom. Then suddenly we're in a desert, with pyramids, in the Greed layer. Despite the fact that this place is hell, there isn't any issue with variety and locations, that's for sure. Here we have the final encounter with V2, where he wants revenge for the first battle, and for you taking his arm. It leads credence to the fact that these robots must have some sort of human desire in them. Why would V2 want revenge on V1 if they were just mindless killing machines? With the Wrath layer, we have tons of water. Tons and tons of water. Here you learn what the extinction of humans has done to the river Styx, and what happened to people that patrolled the river. There's also implications of how important Gabriel is to certain people in hell, particularly the ferryman. Despite his tough exterior, he does indeed care about his job as the Judge of Hell. The Hearsay layer is home to the second encounter with Gabriel, and looks appropriately hellish. So you fight and win, and he goes off to kill the council. For the fact that he was defeated twice by a machine means that he believes that God will never come back, and that the council is just stringing people on so they can stay in power. For the last layer right now, violence, we get a little snapshot of what the world was like when the final war was going on, with these creepy as hell mannequins and the big boy machines that are a pain to take down. And that's it for the story. Overall, I'd say I enjoyed the themes and the questions it asked about things like humanity and purpose. There is clearly a deep story that wants to be told, and I'm all for it. I didn't even talk about the secret missions and how they play into it and the testaments that you find within. It plays to what I like in a story, and I was fascinated to learn more about it, even if the way you do that is disjointed from the gameplay. To talk about the gameplay, I should talk about what I feel is the biggest strength of this game, but could potentially be the biggest Achilles heel, depending on your taste. V1's movements flow weightlessly around the play area. You'd expect a robot of its stature to feel much more clunky, but not here, as you can dash up to 3 times, slide along the floor and through tight passageways, slam the ground to break down long shafts and damage enemies, grapple to certain points with your grappling hook, as well as wall jumping. There are even some movement techniques that are secret and you need to find out through experimentation. Due to the amount of speed you can reach zooming around, there were many times where I felt uncontrollable, whether it's because of how hectic enemy encounters can be, or maybe you get blasted in some random direction because of an explosion. Needless to say, this game can be too much for even more experienced players in this genre. I feel like I have a pretty decent reaction time, but some confrontations just felt impossible. I'm thankful that this game is generous when it comes to checkpoints, because doing 3 or 4 tough gauntlets in a row just to bite it at the last second is very frustrating. Due to this being related to Dante's The Divine Comedy, you go down 9 different layers, with 2 layers having 4 levels apiece, and a 3rd layer that has 2 levels, with the 2nd holding the boss. Sadly, due to the early access nature of the game, it only goes down to layer 7 as of making this video. Each layer has its own secret mission that you can access by doing a variety of things, to finding a secret exit in a stage, to turning off different things, which, once again, opens up a way to a secret exit, to flipping a coin into water. It's also where a lot of the more philosophical elements show up, so if you're a lore hunter, then going after these missions will be your best bet. These missions can take many different forms. From the Witless, Fishing, Crash Bandicoot, into this. These are usually dumb fun, but there are some that do shed light on what's going on. Many of the levels offer a multitude of ways around these playground-esque arenas, with things like bounce pads and other movement obstacles giving you many different ways for encounters to play out. It leads to the levels having a supreme sense of verticality. As you fill your enemies with lead, it raises your style rank, very similar to a certain character action game that you may know of. It's funny doing research for this video, just how much this game and Devil May Cry have in common. Both are loosely based on the Divine Comedy, both have a style system that goes up to SS, that's about it. Switching between different weapons, killing many enemies at once, as well as switching between getting headshots and limb shots. It's important if you care about getting a good rank at the end of a stage. You're ranked by your time, amount of kills, and your style points, and are deducted ranks based on how many times you die. Better ranks give you more points, which you can spend in the shop to buy variations of guns you pick up throughout the game. But what about those guns I hear you saying? They are pretty important after all. You start out with a pretty standard pistol. It gets variations where you flip a coin up and shoot the coin to hit enemy weak points, and one that lets you ricochet bullets off walls. I got the most use out of that one. It's especially good if the enemy is between 2 walls. The shotgun is good for crowds and when you're right up the ass of a big monster. Great for when you use the pump action variant where you can pump for extra damage. The nail gun acts as your minigun. It can output tons of nails, but I hardly use it because it's horribly inaccurate. The variants don't fix the issue much either. The railgun is good for taking out big enemies quickly, and the drill variant is good for dealing constant damage as well as giving you blood to heal off of. It takes a few seconds to charge up, and I often forget to switch to it due to how fast combat is. Lastly, you have the good old rocket launcher, good for blowing shit up, and the classic rocket jump. Just make sure there aren't any enemies around when you do that, because the resulting explosion will hurt. The variant lets you shoot a cannonball, which is nice. I do think the progression in terms of points is a little borked, however, where I amassed quite a lot of points with nothing to spend it on. I'm sure that's most likely due to the early access nature of the game. In general, I think the game can look very pretty at times, but it's all about if you enjoy that classic, old, retro PS1 aesthetic. Although the art gives off more of a 50s vibe rather than a 90s first-person shooter, I mean just grayscale the image and look at it and tell me you don't see it too. If you are a fan, then I'd say you're in for a visual treat. Readability is a big problem here, however. Due to the ultra-violent nature and the fact that you need to douse yourself in blood, the screen can and will be just covered with particle effects, making it really hard to see what's going on at times, which obviously leads to taking extra hits that you don't need to. Can you tell what's going on the screen right now? I'm the one who played and recorded the game, and I don't even know what's going on. So don't be shocked if you start taking damage from off-screen because you can't see. The game is good with giving enemies plenty of audio and visual cues to when they're attacking, but sometimes it's still not enough. And perhaps the most important tool in your arsenal, parrying. Add another one to the list? I'm being serious here. I don't think the game emphasizes how important parrying is to just general survival. Most attacks can be parried unless they have a blue flash. When you have 50 bullets coming towards your ass at any one time, parrying will be your only option. Depending on which attacks you do parry, they can do some serious damage. It also gives health back when you pull it off, and with enemies that are moving around so much, it's practically required. Thankfully, the window does seem generous, so you don't have to be a master to pull it off. Nothing is really stopping you from jumping into a group of enemies and mashing the punch button. You get back health, and if you happen to parry something, that's extra damage and more health. Just be careful, because there are some enemies where that is the worst possible thing you can do. The objectives of the stages are quite simple. Get to the end. What that entails depends on the level, of course, but most of the time it requires fighting through large rooms and hallways, filled with some of the most annoying enemies, mostly those higher class mooks that can take some punishment and deal heavy retribution in return. Some enemies can go into an enraged state where they go apeshit and attack constantly. This game does have friendly fire, so maybe you can use that to your advantage. Nah, most of the time it's a death sentence, so try your best not to let that happen. Friendly fire can be helpful in certain situations though. Sadly, I think one of the biggest issues with the game is its controls. Not how V1 handles, as I said earlier. He glides fairly effortlessly around the stages, although I do think the mouse sensitivity could be less finicky. I had it around 25, and even that felt a bit high, but I didn't want to turn it any lower because of how fast these enemies could go. I played with mouse and keyboard, so perhaps it handles better on a controller. It actually shares an issue with Cruelty Squad, in that it tries to jam as much in as possible. Movement, changing weapons on the top number buttons, switching to different weapon variants, punching, switching arms, sliding, dashing, jumping, grappling. It's a lot to handle, leading to a lot of times where I hit the keys accidentally as I try to process what's going on. At least there, with its slower paced combat, it wasn't so much of an issue, but here, with how fast combat can be, it's a struggle, to say the least. Not to mention that this game can get extremely difficult at times. This isn't some game where you can have a podcast on in the background. No, this game needs your utmost attention all the time because of all the shit coming at you, and I played this game on the standard difficulty. I can only imagine how much of a pain in the ass it could be on harder ones, if they were actually done. The game does provide a very handy assist mode, giving you tons of different parameters to change, such as damage and general game speed, helpful for those that are struggling with certain aspects. Not for me though, as I'm a true gamer and will wear that D rank with pride. Is it wrong of me to say that I enjoy the boss fights the most? The battles between the boss fights are adrenaline pumping to no end, but the visual diarrhea that the screen can become just makes me frustrated. Not to mention that some of these enemies are just a pain in the ass to deal with. Either because the new enemies they introduce are bullet sponges, or they just continue to pile on more and more enemies to try and make encounters harder. Boss battles fare much better, as most of the time, it's an intense one-on-one with formidable foes. That way, there isn't nearly as much visual clutter. Don't get me wrong though, that does not mean that these bosses are a walk in the park. Fuck no. These guys are fast and relentless, barely giving you any time to breathe. Due to this, it's tough to keep them on the screen because of how fast they zip all over the place, and because of how regaining health works. Don't be shocked if you get killed trying to heal up on a boss that has very few openings. Despite those issues, I feel that the boss fights are still the best part of the game. My personal favorite being the two Gabriel fights and the ferryman. They all share unique patterns and fighting styles, and they usually have a way to deal massive damage and interrupt those patterns, mostly through parrying certain attacks. But I tell you, parrying is important. All the other bosses aren't bad, but all have something that I'm not exactly a fan of. B2 moves way too quickly to get a beat on. The fight against the Leviathan is cool design-wise, but the fight itself is kind of boring. For the Minotaur, you could have made these platforms a little bigger, guys. The second phase can end in a few seconds if you pair the charge. Just a heads up, the Earth Mover is climactic for sure, and normally I'm not a huge fan of platforming bosses, but the movement is fun enough that it isn't all that bad. It even has some more implications with the fact that there are what looks like towns on top of it, corroborated in the entry for it. The bosses are generally fun to fight, with a few exceptions that I really can't stand. Since I'm bad at writing, let's switch gears to something I'm surprised I haven't talked about yet, the music. It starts off rocking, really gets you in the mood to Ultrakill, but it doesn't take long before different genres fuse into the rock. I noticed plenty of orchestra instruments, such as pianos and strings, to give off an epic feel to the more bombastic fights. I do wish the sound mixing could be a little better. Even with the music maxed out, it still gets drowned out in the gunfire and mayhem. That gunfire though is peak in the sound department. Everything sounds so crunchy, and nothing is quite as satisfying as blasting a large group of enemies. Ultrakill is definitely one of the best arena shooters that I've played. I'm excited for this game to finally be complete, to see what the final 2 layers have in store. Expect a short reprise of this video once that's finally done. I give it my highest recommendation, if that means anything to you. So get out of here and go play Ultrakill. Those demons aren't going to die themselves. Have fun blasting your way through hell, and thank you for watching this video.